You ever hear metal scream like it's alive, like it's begging somebody to stop hurting it? Because that's what I heard at 12:15 a.m. that night. Steel crying out in the dark as someone forced bolt cutters through the lock on my front gate. And for a moment, I just sat there in my kitchen, lights off, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, thinking, yep, they finally did it. They actually went and did it. And if you've ever lived out here in the quiet parts of America, where stars hang low and frogs talk louder than people, you know that kind of silence before chaos, that still breath of the land when it feels like the world is about to tilt. And my gut whispered, they crossed the line this time. Bob, they crossed it real good. My crime? Not a meth lab, not zoning violations, not running a rooster fight club. No, sir. Just existing 3 miles outside an HOA. Maplewood Estates, gated driveways, curated roses, matching mailboxes polished like trophies, perfectly trimmed lawns so sharp they might cut you if you stared too long. And their president, Karen Hall, a woman who didn't just believe in rules, she worshipped them, ironed them, probably tucked them in at night, and kissed them on the forehead like they were her blessed children. For weeks, she'd been circling me like a hawk with a clipboard, petitioning the county, sending letters, snapping pictures through my fence, telling me my tomatoes were visually disruptive to community sightlines, and my chickens were odorous assets negatively impacting shared property value ecosystems. Fancy way of saying, she hated seeing nature behave like nature. I'd laughed at first, you kinda have to, but folks like her don't stop when you laugh. They double down, they sharpen the clipboard corners, and start swinging with paperwork instead of fists, because the only thing scarier than someone with a weapon is someone who believes their pen is the weapon God personally handed them. So there I was, listening to that lock snap, every instinct from 30 years as a cop waking up, stretching its legs, whispering, this ain't curiosity anymore, this is invasion. And deep in my chest something old stirred, the kind of feeling that sleeps when life's peaceful but never dies. The part of me that handled domestic calls, meth dens, and men with too much pride and not enough patience. I slid my chair back slow, peeked through the blinds, and saw flashlights jerking like nervous ghosts along my driveway. Saw shapes in tactical pants and black polos. Saw a white Range Rover parked at the front like a Chariot of Entitlement Deluxe Edition. And at the front of it all, Karen, blonde helmet hair untouched by humidity or humility, clutching a leather folder like it was the Constitution rewritten by her HOA committee. I should tell you something right now, so you don't think I'm reckless or dumb. I wasn't surprised. See, when you spend 3 decades on the job and you retire to a quiet farm thinking you'll grow tomatoes and read the paper without worrying about who's lying today, habits still stick. Eyes notice. Patterns scream. I'd seen the gray Ford parked near my gate 3 days in a row, different drivers, same stillness. The kind of watching that ain't friendly, the kind that smells like intent. So yeah, I watched them cut my lock, creep toward my porch like they were Delta Force storming a barnyard insurgency. And I didn't panic, didn't yell, didn't grab my shotgun like some folks would. I just pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over one contact labeled Chief. Off duty, because this wasn't surprise. This was chapter 3 in a story I saw coming. Before all this, before the letters, the threats, the violations, something else had happened. Complaints started showing up at the police department, folks telling stories about Maplewood Estates bullying them off land, fining them into selling, enforcing aesthetic standards, like a fancy phrase for legalized extortion. And guess who called me one evening, hat in hand, voice low, asking if I could help run a little monitoring project out here on my open land? James Anderson, my old partner, now chief. Bob, he'd said, cracking open a beer on my porch like we were back in uniform days. We need a set of eyes off the books, someone who knows how to watch without being watched, someone they won't recognize. And that someone was me, retired, quiet, harmless Farmer Bob. A perfect little decoy wrapped in denim and chicken feathers. So yeah, my barn wasn't just a barn anymore. Not since those unmarked vans came in the night with sealed crates and files stamped case evidence. Not since the county paperwork quietly turned my property into a temporary evidence safe house with surveillance tied into the department. And Karen? She just thought she found herself a dirt-covered villain in overalls. Anyway, I stepped onto my porch as they approached, barefoot, mug in hand like I had just stepped out here to watch the moon breathe. She raised her chin like a swan that paid extra for neck privileges. Mr. Miller, she called, voice pitched high enough to break fragile glass and fragile egos. We are here for a mandatory property inspection, in accordance with Maplewood Estate's jurisdictional extension policies. I stared at her. Blink. Sip coffee. Another blink. Ma'am, I said, soft as a lullaby. You drove 3 miles out of your gated fantasy to cut my lock at midnight. That ain't an inspection, that's trespassing, and those bolt cutters don't look like community outreach. Her security guy, big fella, broad shoulders, jaw like he practiced clinching professionally, stepped forward. Open the gate, or we will access by force. I laughed. Couldn't help it. It came out like a cough from the soul. Buddy, I said, you already did. Behind them, floodlights flickered from motion sensors I'd placed not for coyotes, but for situations exactly like this. I watched Marcus, that was his name, scan the perimeter like a man who suddenly realized maybe the rabbit wasn't the prey. You are in violation of HOA code, Karen started, but I raised a hand. No, ma'am. You are in violation of something much bigger than cul-de-sac commandments. And right then, right in the silence between her confusion and her reply, I felt it. A soft vibration in my pocket, the short buzz that only came from one person. James. Message read, let them commit. Cameras rolling. I smiled into my coffee like it tasted better than justice ever had. See, fights don't always start with fists or fury. Sometimes they start with bolt cutters and arrogance, and someone believing land is just land, not legacy, not life, not the last piece of dignity a person gets to choose for themselves. That night wasn't the battle. That night was the match struck in a field full of dry grass, and I could feel every blade waiting to burn. And as they fanned out like they owned the earth, I whispered to myself, all right then, let's dance. Marcus pushed past my front step like he was breaching a cartel bunker, one hand hovering over a concealed holster like he wanted me to notice, like intimidation was a language and he was fluent, while Karen stayed behind the gate pretending she was a general commanding troops instead of a bored suburban tyrant with a superiority complex and a Pinterest board labeled Victory Aesthetics. And I just stood there, mug steaming gently in my hand, heart steady, breath slow, the kind of calm that comes from 3 decades of walking into real danger. Not HOA cosplay militia danger, but real life. One wrong twitch, and someone dies danger. And I watched this man, this wannabe enforcer, walk into my house like he had every right in the world. Inside, boots thudded across hardwood, drawers opened, lights switched on. They weren't here to inspect, they were here to search, to dig, to find anything that could justify what they already believed. Funny thing about belief, when you go looking for guilt instead of truth, you always think you found it. Karen lifted her chin again, that signature move of hers, and said, Mr. Miller, it would be easier if you simply cooperated. I leaned on the porch beam, took another sip, stared at her like she was reading from a script written by someone who'd never met a real problem in their life. Ma'am, I said soft and steady, I am cooperating. I'm letting you write your own, ending with permanent marker. Confusion flickered across her face for half a heartbeat before she smoothed it over with the same expression HOA presidents get right before they find somebody for having a slightly enthusiastic lawn gnome. But behind her composure, I saw something crack, just a thin little fracture, the kind you only catch if you've stared into hundreds of faces deciding whether to lie, run, or fight. She wasn't here for property values. She wasn't here for chickens or barn colors. She was here for control, and beneath that, for gain. And when people taste power that isn't theirs, they'll drink it until it poisons them. The radio on someone's belt crackled, quiet, coded phrases, nothing a civilian would catch, but I caught it. Old instincts never retire, they just move into the guest bedroom of your brain. Team 2 at barn. Lock cut. Camera spray covered. Proceeding to interior. Oh, they were committed now. Deep committed. No backing out, no misunderstanding, no community wellness check story could save them. And then, from the distance, sirens. Not close, not rushing, not dramatic, just present, waiting, hovering. One of Karen's hired men flinched when he heard them. That tiny twitch of someone who suddenly wonders if they're the hero or the pawn. Karen didn't flinch. She doubled down like pride was her oxygen tank. You're resisting improvement of the community experience, she said, voice shaking just enough to give her away. I laughed, Not the hearty kind, the tired kind, the kind that echoes out from somewhere deep where disappointment lies. Lady, I said, quiet as a prayer. You came to a man's home at midnight with bolt cutters, fake security badges, and a PowerPoint folder. That ain't improvement. That's breaking and entering dipped in delusion. Inside the house, I heard something fall, with scraping, metal clinking. They'd reached the hallway closet. 2 layers behind that. The access panel to the barn feed. They thought they were about to uncover something big. Drugs, maybe. Guns. Documents. Evidence they could plant. A reason to say, see, we were right to come. They didn't know what sat in that barn. Federal evidence storage. Active case materials. Direct link to the police department. Every step they took in there was a felony times 10. The door burst open and Marcus marched out, breathing heavier now, adrenaline hitting the edge where excitement turns into dread. There's a locked area back there, he said to Karen. Probably hiding something. Karen's eyes lit up like she'd just found buried treasure in someone else's sandbox. Open it, she ordered. Document everything. Marcus snapped his chin in a sharp nod like he thought he was in a movie. I set my mug down. Slow. Deliberate. Ceramic against wood. Quiet. Final. You cut that lock, I said, voice low, steady, the kind of tone that once made grown men hand over weapons without blinking. And your life changes in ways you ain't ready for. He hesitated, just for a breath, just long enough to show he heard the truth. Then he lifted the crowbar. And right then, right there, floodlights exploded across the yard. White, bright, unforgiving. Red lasers cut across the driveway like angry stars waking up. A helicopter thundered overhead, rotor wash rolling across the field, whipping dust and leaves and Karen's perfect hair into chaos. Bullhorn cracked the night open. Police. Step back and drop everything. Marcus froze mid-motion, crowbar hovering in the air like it suddenly weighed 100 pounds. Karen's jaw hit the bottom of her confidence. Her clipboard slipped from her hand. Even the men outside staggered like the world flipped under them. Black SUVs poured from the tree line. Uniforms moved fast, efficient, trained, real authority stepping in where pretend authority tried to play king. And through the spotlight glare, walking with the calm of someone who'd waited months for this moment, came Chief James Anderson. He didn't shout, didn't puff up, didn't brag. He just looked at me and nodded like we were 2 old dogs who knew every inch of each other's instincts. Bob, he said, you all right? I shrugged like we were talking about weather and not a militia raid. Coffee's getting cold, I replied. Then he turned to Karen, and the softness melted off him like paint in a fire. Karen Hall, he announced, voice projecting calm authority that crushed the air flat. You and your associates are under investigation for criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit fraud, property intimidation schemes, and attempted breach of a protected evidence facility. Karen blinked. Evidence? She whispered like the word was foreign. James nodded toward the barn. You raided a police operation. Silence. Thick enough to cut. Then, panic. Marcus dropped the crowbar. 3 men tried to run. One tripped over his own boots. Karen shook her head like she could rewind the night with denial alone. I was enforcing rules, she sputtered. I have jurisdiction. No, I said, stepping forward, voice quiet and final. You had arrogance. And now you have consequences. Handcuffs clicked like punctuation to a story already told. And as they loaded her into the cruiser, hair wild, mascara smearing like justice drew its own war paint, she stared at me. Shock, rage, disbelief melting into one raw realization. She didn't lose by accident. She lost because she never knew the enemy she picked. I lifted my mug again, even though it was empty now. To property rights, I whispered, and to minding your damn business. The sun wasn't up yet, but the sky was doing that quiet silver thing it does right before dawn. The kind of morning that tells you the world survived whatever storm hit it the night before, even if the air still tastes like adrenaline and dust and the last echo of shouted commands. Karen sat in the back of the squad car, staring straight ahead, mouth tight, hands cuffed, trying to hold on to whatever dignity she thought she still had, and watching her in that cramped little space felt strange. Not satisfying in the wild, triumphant kind of way most folks imagine. Not fireworks, not cheering, just a deep, quiet kind of rightness, like watching a fence finally snap back into place after someone bent it out of shape. You don't always celebrate when a threat is removed. Sometimes you just breathe again. One officer walked Marcus past me, wristbound, head down, adrenaline fading into that gray reality men get when they realize bravado ain't armor. He didn't look at me until they opened the cruiser door, and when he did, his eyes weren't angry like before. They were scared, small, human again. Could have just let us search, he muttered, voice cracking. You didn't have to trap us like that. I held his stare, stayed calm, didn't move, didn't blink. You walked into the trap, I said, soft as prayer, sharp as truth. And you dragged innocent people with you. He swallowed hard, had no answer, sat down in the cruiser like the seat stole the fight right out of him. Karen kept staring at me through the glass. I thought she'd scream. I thought she'd threaten lawsuits, shout about rights, HOA bylaws, property values, divine suburban authority. Instead, she whispered something I barely heard. You ruined everything. But the thing is, she never understood what everything was. She built her life like an HOA rulebook, appearance over substance, control over community, power over peace. That ruins things long before consequences arrive. James walked back toward me, hands in his pockets, exhaustion hanging on him like a heavy jacket. Gotta admit, he said, voice low and weary. I didn't think she'd escalate this far. You okay? I nodded, picking up my mug, swirling cold coffee like it could still warm something inside me. I knew she would, I said. People like her don't stop when they're wrong. They stop when someone stronger tells them they're done. He smirked, shook his head, not at me, but at the absurdity of all of it, and clapped a hand on my shoulder before heading back to coordinate paperwork and press briefings and all the machinery that comes after a takedown like this. The yard slowly emptied of flashing lights and tactical gear, replaced by morning fog and the first lazy crow calling somewhere near the tree line. And suddenly the world was simple again. Fences, grass, soil waiting for a day's work. Peace, not because someone granted it, but because someone defended it. I walked the property line like I always did. Habit, ritual, promise, checking the fence where they cut, the barn door they pried, the camera they spray painted, the quiet places where fear used to live these past weeks. Funny thing, when danger goes quiet, it leaves space for gratitude if you let it. I stopped by the garden. The tomatoes were ready for picking, heavy on the vine, stubborn in the way life tends to be when chaos tries to distract you. That's the thing about tending land. It doesn't wait for drama to finish. It demands presence, patience, work, the honest kind that doesn't ask for applause. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from my neighbor, Maria. Saw the news. Coffee at the market on me? Proud of you. Then another from old Pete with the horses. Knew you'd stand tall. Holler if you need help fixing that gate. And a third from Jesse, the lawyer. The dominoes just started falling. This changes HOAs everywhere. Call me when you wake up. Huge press wants interviews. I chuckled. Low, tired, real. Never thought retirement hobbies would include dismantling a criminal HOA empire and becoming some kind of folk hero to folks who just want to paint their barns how they damn please. A crow flapped down onto my fence post, cocked its head at me like it was checking to see if I was still breathing after the storm, then hopped twice and flew off into the sunrise. I walked back toward the porch, boots crunching gravel, heart finally settling steady again. Karen's SUV, flat tires, dented pride, still sat crooked on the road where the deputies left it overnight. Thought about everything she'd tried to take: privacy, dignity, livelihood, peace. And what she actually gave me instead: clarity, community, and a legacy I never asked for, but maybe earned the long way around. At the porch steps, I paused, closed my eyes, let the morning settle. Sometimes peace feels like a whisper after a hurricane. I poured fresh coffee, leaned on the railing, and looked out over land that fought back, not with violence, but with truth, patience, and a bit of old-fashioned stubborn refusal to bow to bullies in pressed suits. And then, like it was part of the ritual, I turned to the camera, not the security one, but the one I set on the porch rail for days like this, and I spoke to the folks who'd understand. Listen, you ever deal with someone who mistakes authority for ownership? Someone who thinks rules are weapons instead of tools? Someone who can't stand the idea that you're free and they don't control you? I breathed slow, let the thoughts land heavy, honest. Then you already know this story. And maybe you've lived your own version of it. HOA, boss, neighbor, family member, doesn't matter the title, just the mindset. A laugh, soft, dry, shaped by experience. If someone spends their life trying to shrink yours, don't let him. Stand your ground. Stay decent, stay smart. Then I leaned closer, like sharing a secret earned, not given. Because bullies don't break strong people. They expose themselves trying. I lifted my coffee in a small salute. Tell me in the comments, do you think Karen got what she deserved? And what's the worst HOA story you've ever heard or lived? I'll be here reading them while I tend these tomatoes. One last look at the sunrise washing the ranch gold. And I smiled. Stay free. And remember, respect boundaries. Yours and everybody else's. Fade out. Wind in the fence wire. Coffee steam in the cool morning air. Justice settling into the soil. The land was quiet again. And so was I.